Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I want to appreciate and thank you for being a part of this podcast today from the Perch. I try to deal with the issues, and sometimes they're going to be political or what's in the news. Sometimes they're just what's happening around us. And of course, if you've been alive the last 18 months, you're fully aware that there's a pandemic. There's all sorts of things happening within the context of that pandemic worldwide. I'm hearing reports now of where are the workers, not just here in America, but worldwide. The number of jobs that are available. I see close by to where I live, a Taco Bell offering $21 an hour for people to work, and they can't find people to work even at that. We know unemployment things are going on. We know rent moratoriums are still on. That were sponsored by the CDC and not a congressional act. So we see all sorts of people not working. The number of first-time job claims out of California this week have been disturbing based on the fact that all these jobs are available. But we also know that physically speaking, I did a funeral this last week. I have a memorial service this coming Sunday afternoon for someone from my church who died of COVID. We were hearing of other people dying of COVID. And I've never said it's not real. I've never said it's a hoax or it's fake. I've questioned the narrative of a lot of the medical stuff coming out. However, I do believe it's real. I had it. It took me out for about a week. Now, one thing I do know for sure, folks were praying for me. Thousands of people were praying for me. And as a type 1 diabetic, every time I get pneumonia, I'm in the hospital. This is the first time in 20, almost 30 years of being a diabetic that I've gotten pneumonia and not been hospitalized for it. And I give a lot of credit to the vitamins I was taking, the vitamin D, the zinc, pumping vitamin C, and building up my body in those areas. And also because of the people that were praying for me. So I have been sick. I do know what it's like to be ill and hospitalized. But I do believe that God heals, okay? I believe God heals. But I also know that sometimes God just maintains and helps you live above those situations. We'll look at a classic case in a minute. But if you have a Bible, turn to Deuteronomy chapter 28. And if you look at Deuteronomy 28, 29, and 30, you find some principles. They're going into the promised land, and God tells them through Moses, if you live by the rules, if you live by the laws, if you keep my commandments, you will be the head and not the tail. I'll keep the pestilence away. I'll bless your crops. I'll bless your family. I'll bless your bodies. I'll bless the fields. I'll bless everything. But if you will not obey the Lord, verse 15, to observe to do all his commandments, his statutes, which I charge you today, then all these curses shall come upon you and overtake you. Now we live basically in a world that's cursed. We understand that. And I'm thankful that the curse will one day be entirely broken. I'm thankful that the blood of Jesus can bring restoration to our bodies and our healings. And I do believe God heals. I have experienced healings in my body. I believe God keeping me out of the hospital with pneumonia was an act of God and an act of prayer, and that he was faithful. Was I still sick and weak? Yeah. Did I have something that they say I tested positive for COVID-19? I had something. I also know for a fact I had pneumonia because a contrast x-ray of my chest, a CAT scan showed that. So we do know. Some of you have experienced loss. Some of you are watching today because you've experienced loss and you're thinking, how in the world did this happen? Is it just because God doesn't move anymore? God doesn't heal? No. A couple of weeks ago, a young lady named, I don't know her name, but she was in her church. She testified during a service that she had been healed of a brain tumor in our church. I prayed. I felt led to pray for her. She went by no, and we felt led to pray for her here. And the next Sunday, she's in Indiana, and their pastor felt led to pray for her there. She goes to the doctor that week, and the doctor says, "Don't know what you've been doing, but that brain tumor is gone, gone, gone." So I believe God heals. We've seen people healed in my church over the last 6 months. Everything from headaches gone. To people having issues with hips and pain and back. We've seen miracles. So I believe God heals. But I also know that sometimes God does not. And it's not that he doesn't want to. Sometimes God can use your weakness. And I'm going to tell you something. We're going to look at Galatians chapter 4. Because many of you are not aware of this. And every time I mention or preach about it, someone goes, that's in the Word. It's in the Word. In Galatians chapter 4, Paul's about to tell you that he was experiencing a bodily illness. Verse 13, he says, but you know that it was because of a bodily illness that I preached the gospel to you the first time. And that which was a trial to you in my bodily condition, you did not despise or loathe. In other words, Paul said, What was going on in my body was obvious, and you did not loathe me. You did not turn your face or go, oh my goodness, what in the world's that? You did not despise or loathe, but you received me as an angel of God, as Christ Jesus himself. Where then is the sense of blessing you had? For I bear you witness that if possible, you would have plucked out your own eyes and given to them. Now, why would Paul say that? Well, there was a common New Testament lifestyle condition that affected the eyes. And many people, I believe Paul had that. And I'm going to give you another verse to talk about that. He says, you would have plucked out your eyes and have given them to me. Now, why would Paul make a statement like that? I mean, you think about it. You know, he's the one that said, you know, if you look at 1 Corinthians chapter 13, hyperbole. You know, noisy gong, clanging cymbal, don't have love, that I become all this. It was hyperbole. Exaggerating the words to make people figure out what he was saying. And here he says, I had a bodily injury. And that's when I preached to you the first time. Now let's look back at 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 7. And because the surpassing greatness of the revelation, for this reason to keep me from exalting myself, there was given me a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, to keep me from exalting myself. So Paul says God allowed, didn't make it happen. He allowed a humbling agent to affect him. And concerning this, I entreated the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. So 3 times Paul says, God, I don't want this. Can you please take this away? Please take this away. And listen to God's response. And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. And so Paul's response was, most gladly, therefore, I would rather boast about my weakness, that the power of Christ may dwell in me. And if we look back at Galatians chapter 6, in verse 11, Paul tells us he had an eye condition. It's right there in the black and white. See with what large letters I am writing to you with my own hand. So in other words, Paul the apostle had a physical issue. And I believe it was his eyes. I believe it was a common medical condition. Paul would have had someone that wrote down those things for him. He was writing out like the letters. It would have been an amanuensis secretary. But here in Galatians, he says, see with what large letters I'm writing with you in my own hand. Paul says it was because of a bodily illness. So no one can say, well, Paul wasn't. Oh, no, that's not what Paul meant. That's what the word says. Paul had an issue. And one of those issues was so bad, he fought God and said, God, 3 times, please take this away. Please take this away. Please take this away. And God said, Paul, I'm not going to do it. Because in your weakness, my grace will be perfected. You know, I've been a diabetic since I was 23. So that's going on 30 years. Next June, sometime in June next year, I will have been a diabetic for 30 years. Now, I've gone to the doctor, I've done all sorts of tests and this and that, and I find out that I don't have the kidney issues that I should have. I'm thankful that God is working. I do my best to maintain my weight. I do my best with what I eat. I do my best. My family will tell you I'm the healthiest eater in my family. Do I sometimes eat things I shouldn't eat? Well, everybody does. Let's just face that. But I stay consistent with my weight. I stay consistent with my health. Vitamins, I try to stay healthy. When I get here at the church in the mornings, I walk up and down the stairs. I get 30 to 35 flights every day of stairs. I want to maintain my weight. I want to watch I want to live longer. I want to be careful. I want to honor the body God's given me because I got an affliction. So I can say all sorts of things. I know people have been diabetic for 20 years and they've got more physical conditions than I have at almost 30. So I realize I'm responsible for this temple. I'm supposed to glorify God in my body, and this is the temple. Now, not everybody's made good choices. We understand that. Not everybody has had things be fair to you, and this is not about fair. Sometimes things just happen. Sometimes people die younger than they should. One of the things I do when we get to our local newspaper every Thursday, I just did it earlier today, I go through and I average the obituaries. And sometimes 52 is a good age. And sometimes it's like, oh boy, man, I'm older than everybody in the newspaper this week. Because it's not about necessarily how long we live. It's about how we live. And so right now, in light of COVID and sickness and illness, I still believe when the word says, I am the God that healeth thee. I still believe that God does miracles. And I believe we're going to see more and more miracles, especially as the world around us becomes less and less able to go to the doctor, as medical expenses begin to skyrocket, as we're seeing many people fired or quitting, and we see hospitals having less and less and less of those things. We see those things. I do a lot of high protein in my diet, for the one that's asking about that. I eat a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruits, a lot of vitamins. I make sure I'm eating good, healthy, sustained diet. I stay away from sugars, and once again, my family will tell you that. I do my best to eat well and good portions. But even at that, I've got a condition. I've got a disease that I have to watch out for, stay ahead of. I called the ER and said, I need this last week, a week ago, and I said, I know I'm going to go into DKA because I'm starting to get dehydrated. I can't keep food down. So can I please come in and get a saline solution? They said, come on in. So by taking that into effect, I was able to override what my body was going. I recognized the signs, and I was never hospitalized with pneumonia, which every single time in the last 30 years when I've got pneumonia, I have been hospitalized because of it. So I look at this and I say, God, you did a miracle in my life. You actually helped my body get where it needs to get. Okay? Paul heard the message, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. When Daniel was thrown in the lion's den, I know he trusted God. But it wasn't Daniel that shut the mouths of the lions. It was the God who was there with him. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego went into the fiery furnace, it wasn't them and their faith that kept the flames and the heat back. It was that fourth man in the fire that walked with them. And sometimes, yes, you and I will go through physical difficulties. And yes, I've done a lot. I've done over 300 funerals in my lifetime as a pastor. I average about 10 a year. And there have been people who have died way too young. And there are people who lasted so much longer than the doctors and family thought they would live. I've seen it on both. I've done everything from stillborn babies to people over 100 years old. Every decade of life I've done funerals for. Kids, children, toddlers, babies, teenagers, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and over 100. So I understand that sometimes people are healthier than others. We know how that works. And sometimes it is sin in your life that will cause you to be sick and cause you to be ill. I've done a lot of funerals for people who had lung cancer, emphysema, who smoked all their lives. And there's no doubt about the impact of the smoking on what they were doing. I understand that. Those things happen. I also know healthy people, more healthy than you can imagine, who suddenly are in center field running towards a ball. And they have a heart attack because there'd been a hole in their heart or a congenital defect that nobody knew about. There's always going to be things we don't understand and don't know. I'm still trying to figure out what happened to Mocha. We come home one day and that normally healthy dog was just gone. There's things we're always never going to understand. And the thing is, we don't have to understand everything. So yes, there's a pandemic going on. Yes, there are people dying of COVID. One thing that we can do is we can focus more and more of our prayers on those that are sick. And we can focus more and more of our time in prayer on helping and praying for those that are sick. And asking God for wisdom. One thing that we can do personally, individually, is we can say, okay, God, what am I doing? What choices am I making physically that are impacting my health in a bad way that I need to be convicted of? And then say, Lord, convict me of those things. As a diabetic, I typically eat the very same thing every place I go. And here's why. Because over the years, from an insulin pump and from testing glucose levels, I know if there's a place in town called Annie Ruby's, I get breakfast every morning, okay? Or most every morning. I get scrambled eggs, bacon, and I get hash browns. Sometimes I get grits. I straighten up. I know exactly how many units of insulin it takes me to cover those three things, okay? And if I just get one or two of those, I know exactly what it costs me, because over 30 years of being a diabetic, I've tested, I've watched, I've looked, and I know that breakfast every morning will cost me 11.4 units of insulin. If I change it to grits, it actually is 12.3, but it might be a little bit healthier. I never put ketchup on the potatoes. I never put cheese on the eggs or things like that. But I know if I do, what those things cost. And so I've done my best. If I have to run through fast food, I get the same thing typically every single time. And not that I get bored with it, because I know how much insulin I'm going to need to cover that. Because I want to live on the edge. I want to make sure everything is covered and I do right with my body. And because I do have type 1 diabetes, I've got to be even more careful. I wear a Dexcom G6. It tells me, and every once in a while you'll hear the signal going off, or it's high or it's low, or those things when I'm on to pray with me or other things. And I just simply, those are tools that help me monitor what I'm eating. I want to stay in shape. I want to stay healthy. And that's why I walk the stairs every morning in our church. That's why I try to keep my weight at a certain weight. When my dad passed away, I'm just being very transparent, he weighed over 400 pounds. I had a sister that passed away years ago, was well over 500 pounds. My grandma on my dad's side, when she passed away, was very, very heavy. So I know that even though I'm a lot like my mom and look a lot like my grandpa Coverstone, I know inside the genetic aspects of my body, if I'm not careful, I could gain a lot of weight. And so that's in the back of my mind. And because it's in the back of my mind, I want to do as best as I possibly can to stay healthy. I want to stay healthy. And that means you folks do the same thing I'm doing. Why? Because it's the biblical. This is the temple of the Holy Spirit, and I'm supposed to protect it, take care of it, guide it, lead it. I'm responsible for what I put in my mouth, whether it's at a buffet or whether it's at a church cook or whatever. I know what I need to do. I know how I need to live. And so looking at healing in light of COVID, nothing's changed. Look, nothing has changed biblically. Nothing has changed biblically. Some of you have dealt with medical conditions all of your life. Let me ask you this. Have you seen the faithfulness of God in those difficult moments and times when you didn't know what to do, but God came through? Aren't you thankful for people that prayed for you when you were down? Aren't you thankful for people that cared enough about you to pray for you and call and ask, how you doing? How's this going? How's that going? You see, all those things matter. Paul told the church of Galatia that, he had a sickness. And he said, when I came to you, you didn't loathe me. You didn't turn your eyes and go, oh my goodness. All of us have been in place. We've seen something that we just think, what in the world is that? And you want to stare, you want to look at it. And I hope that those that have those kind of conditions don't look at that as a learning experience. When my kids were very little, I had my son and we were going to the bathroom or something. We were coming back, and there was a physically handicapped individual in a wheelchair. And I said hello to the mother and was talking to the mother. And you could tell that she was kind of like on edge. And I said, hey, tell me about your little boy. I said, look, man, I'm a pastor. This is my son. And I want to teach my son how to address these things in public and not be inappropriate. And she's like, oh, okay. And she said, here's the situation. Here's what's going on. He can't really do a whole lot. He's not very mobile. But we take him where we go, and he listens to us, and he smiles a lot. And she told me his name, and so I said, Micah, this is so-and-so. And his mom just told us a story. And I've done that with my kids all their lives because I want them to recognize that I don't want there to be outcasts around me. And I want nobody who's sick or gone through a physical or mental or emotional disability. I don't want anybody to feel like, oh, they're looking at me. And so I want to teach and train my kids. And that's why every Wednesday night, my son picks up a special needs young man and puts him in his car and brings him in the wheelchair and brings him to church. And because I wanted my kids to understand that sometimes those conditions bring strain on family and people are afraid to go outside or take their kids places. I want my kids to know how to respond to that. And you know what? If we spent more time looking at the opportunities we have to help people and encourage them, diabetes has not destroyed the life of Dana Coverstone. It hasn't. Matter of fact, it's helped me to be very humble. It's helped me to understand and recognize that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. It helps me to understand that just as Paul said, God, please take that. There's been moments I've said, God, please take this. Please take this. But I've not prayed that for a long time. And not just because I gave up and I surrendered, but because I said, okay, Lord, if you've allowed, see, this is the thing. God did not give me diabetes. God allowed it. God allowed it. And so if God allowed that condition in my life, then I got to say, okay, God, you must trust me. You must trust me to walk with this. You must trust me to deal with this, overcome this. You must trust me, Lord, that when I get sick with pneumonia and I'm worried about the hospital, I know, Lord, you're there with me. You know, there was a moment I shared a couple weeks ago when I was really sick. When I woke up at like 2 a.m. and I felt nothing. I felt no presence. I felt no Holy Spirit. I just felt blah. There was nothing there. And I wake, I'm like, God, where are you? Are you there? I know you're there. I know. And the enemy starts saying, yeah, here you are. You're sick. But where's God? You know. And then you're too weak to fight, but you got to fight anyway. And so you just start rebuking, and I start with the weapons of my warfare, not carnal or mighty through God. And that's the verse I start with. Boom, 2 Corinthians chapter 10. I just go. And after about 5 minutes of fighting and quoting, I actually felt something. And you know, it wasn't that God had abandoned me or left me. It wasn't like he said, hey, I'll be back in 10 minutes. It's because we are human beings, and there are times we get weak. You know, we're going to get older. I'm finding out that 52 is not 48, and 48 was not 41. I'm finding out as I get older, things are not like they used to be. But I still say, God, you're faithful. God, you're righteous. God, you're true. I don't pray, take away the diabetes, Lord. Basically, I say, okay, Lord, let me have a great day today with this. Help me to maintain, help me to stay on top of things, help me to guard what I'm eating. And I pray that, God, help me to guard what I'm eating. Because every once in a while, those temptations are there to eat a little bit more than I should. And so I've gotten a place where I do my very, very best to eat about the same amount of food every single time. I try to stay in shape. Like I told you. Some of you are saying, well, I physically can't do that. Okay, what can you do? If you're in a wheelchair, can you just get some little hand weights and work with your arms? Can you lift your legs? I mean, there's little things that we can do that will still make a big difference. The little things that we do make a big difference. You know, I wish I did not have diabetes. I wish God would take it away, but he chose not to. And in choosing not to, I have learned to trust that his grace is sufficient for me, and that his power is all I need to maintain, keep going, and stand strong. You know, diabetes will probably most likely be the physical thing that kills me. Now, look, I could get hit by a truck tomorrow, okay? Or I could get food poison. There's all these things, but nonetheless, I don't think about that or worry about that. I don't wake up thinking, okay, God, how can my diabetes kill me? I wake up thinking, Lord, what door do you want me to walk through? Well, I've got breath. Well, I've got life. Well, I've got a voice. See, God's called me to be a pastor. That's what I am. And I'm telling you what, I'm the happiest when I'm in the pulpit preaching the word. I've spent the last 4 days researching and studying. I've spent about 15 hours on the word yom for day. And I'm going to be sharing those. I picked up a book by Ken Ham called 6 Days when I was at the Ark encounter a couple months ago. And I'm going through it. I'm trying to all these sources because I want to present the word. I want people to realize when they walk out Sunday after church that there's no doubt about the Hebrew word yom in Genesis 1 through 3, and that basically we know for a fact it was literally 6 literal 24-hour days. I'm the happiest when I can research the word and study and pray, and when I can proclaim it, declare it, and I see people respond, when I see people saved, when I see people baptized in the Spirit, when I see people baptized in water, when I see people get it, man, that is just the greatest thing in the world to me because it fulfills my calling. It fulfills my calling. And I'm going to continue to walk in my calling, whether I'm diabetic or not. I'm going to continue to walk. I'm going to continue to walk in ministry, whether I get sick or I stay healthy. I'm going to continue to preach the word, whether I can see well or not. You know, diabetics usually lose their. When I got diagnosed with diabetes, my glucose level was 1,742. Doctor came in 4 times, ordered the test. It came back 1,742. And that doctor stood there and told me, he said, you will probably be blind by the time I was 23 years old. He said, you'll probably be blind by the time you're 30. Forget about having kids, and you might make it past 40. Well, my eyes are in pretty good shape. I wear no-line bifocals, but I can do it. I can read well. I still average about 350 books a year from reading. I enjoy reading. I don't have eye issues. My kidneys are functioning properly, accurately, as well as they possibly can. And I'm 52, 12 years, almost 13 years beyond the age of 40 when they said, you're probably going to be dead by then. Why? Because God's faithful. Doesn't matter what you deal with, what you face, what you carry, what you're handling, what you're holding on to. I believe that until we draw our last breath, no matter how we are physically, where we are mentally or emotionally, until we draw our last breath, God has something he wants to do through you and through me. Doesn't matter what a doctor says. I've done funerals for people who died in their 80s, who were told in their 50s they were going to die within 6 months or a year because of something they had or some cancer or this or that. My grandma in 1980 was told that she had months to live, and she looked at that doctor and she said, I will see my grandson Dana Coverstone graduate. And I did, and she did in 1987, 8 years later. I've seen enough miracles to know and believe that God could heal me. But if he doesn't, I'm not going to doubt who he is. I'm not going to doubt his call upon my life. I'm not going to walk away from his plan or his purpose. I'm going to trust God in light of how I feel, what's going on, or what's happening around me. And until I draw my last breath, I'm going to serve him. And I pray that that's your heart and your purpose and your mission. Nothing makes sense in the world right now unless we see it through the eyes of God. And I'm going to continue to trust that he has a purpose and a plan for your life and for mine. And if he never heals me, it's not going to change my faith. It's not going to make me mad. It's not going to make me put a fist in his face and say, what are you doing this for? Why not? I'm simply going to say, okay, God, I don't like it. I don't understand it, but I'm going to trust you. Obviously, there's a greater purpose for that being in my life than I can see, understand, or imagine. So, Lord, use it. And if I can help another type 1 diabetic be encouraged and be more faithful and more trusting. If I can stand, and I want to stand before him one day and hear those words, well done, my good and faithful servant. That's all I want to hear. I want to know that I didn't whine, gripe, complain, or just, keep saying, God, why not? God, why not? God, why not? There's some things I'll never know answers for. So I keep going. And that's what you and I have to do. My grace is sufficient for you. So if and when you lose a loved one, I don't understand it. You'll never understand it. But you go on. You continue to pray and ask the Lord to bring healing to your body and to those around you. We don't stop praying. Don't stop believing that God heals. He does. The thing about God is he's sovereign. He is sovereign. And Hebrews 11 makes that very clear. You got that hall of faith, and you got those that didn't make it through life. They were sawn in two. They were killed. They hid in holes in the ground. Men of whom the world says was not worthy. So I want to tell you something. God's trusted you with a condition or a disease or an illness. That's high regard from the Lord. He's going to work in your life in spite of that thing. So yeah, I believe God heals. And if he never heals me, I'm still never going to doubt who he is. I'm never going to doubt his word. I'm never going to doubt his plan or his purpose for my life. And you don't have to either. So I hope this has helped somebody out there. I've gotten so many emails and messages about this. Next week on From the Perch, I want to deal with some down-to-earth personal things. We're going to talk about social drinking. We're going to talk about habits and addiction, cigarettes, nicotine, chew, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there, prescription drugs, CBD, medical marijuana. We're going to talk about those things. Why? Because I believe there's a great need to address those things. I know a lot of believers who are hurting themselves because social drinking's taken a little bit more. They've gone across that line. I told you, had a board member at one time that got arrested for DUI, and his wife calls at 2 a.m. and says, "Come down to the drunk tank." And I go down, and he's worried about what people I want to say to the church. And I'm like, it's going to be the newspaper. You see, our decisions affect more than just us. So we're going to look at that next week and just give you what the word says. What the word says. Do not be drunk with wine when there is excess, but be filled with the Spirit. I want to put stuff in my body that's going to influence my mind for the right things and not impact the way that I think, I act, I behave, or anything else. So, hey, God bless today. Thanks for joining me. on this look at healing in light of COVID. And I hope you stand on the word. He is still a God who heals. So see you in the morning. God bless.